The small boy's sobs cut through the Seattle rain like a knife. Judith White stopped dead in her tracks, her exhausted body protesting after 10 hours of kneading dough and decorating cakes at White's sweet legacy. The alley behind her father's bakery was dark, the kind of dark that swallowed sound. But those cries pierced straight through to her heart. She stepped closer, rain soaking through her jacket, and found him huddled behind the dumpster, a tiny figure trembling violently. He couldn't have been more than 7, his face buried in his knees, his expensive-looking clothes soaked through and filthy. "Hey, sweetheart," Judith said softly, crouching down despite her screaming leg muscles. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The boy looked up, and Judith's breath caught. His face was tear-streaked and terrified, delicate features twisted with fear. He said something in Korean, rapid and panicked, then switched to heavily accented English. "I'm lost. I'm so lost. Please, I'm scared." Judith's heart clenched hard. She glanced around the empty alley, seeing no frantic parents, no searching adults, just a terrified child who needed help. "Okay, baby. It's okay. Let's get you out of this rain. I've got somewhere warm and I can get you some food. Does that sound good?" The boy nodded, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. When Judith offered her hand, he took it without hesitation, his small fingers ice cold and gripping hers like a lifeline. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness would change her life forever. That the child clinging to her hand was Kang Minjay, son of one of the most dangerous men in the Pacific Northwest. And that right now, Kang Tamman was systematically destroying Seattle, looking for him. 12 hours earlier, Judith White had started her day the same way she always did, staring at the mirror in her tiny apartment above Kim's records, giving herself the same pep talk she'd been repeating for 3 years. "You're doing fine," she told her reflection, her dark brown skin looking dull from exhaustion, her natural curls pulled back in a practical bun. "You've got the bakery, you've got Mom in a good facility, and you're making it work." At 29, making it work was generous. The dream of opening her own upscale pastry shop had died when her father passed suddenly 3 years ago, leaving behind a struggling neighborhood bakery and medical bills that had swallowed Judith's savings. Then her mother's early-onset dementia had appeared, requiring expensive care that insurance barely covered. But White's sweet legacy was her father's dream, and Judith refused to let it die, even if it meant working herself to exhaustion 6 days a week, creating soul food-inspired pastries that kept the neighborhood coming back. Sweet potato hand pies, peach cobbler tarts, bourbon pecan brownies, each recipe a tribute to her father's memory. "Girl, you look half dead," Zoe Martinez said when Judith arrived at the bakery, at 5 in the morning. Zoe had been her best friend since 3rd grade, one of the few constants in Judith's chaotic life. She stopped by most mornings before her nursing shift. "You working another double?" "Rent's due, and Mama's facility increased their rates," Judith said simply, tying her apron. "Plus, Mrs. Kim upstairs needs groceries delivered. I'm not saying no to the extra $20. Zoe shook her head, affection mixing with exasperation. "Your bleeding heart is gonna kill you one day. You know that, right?" "Probably," Judith agreed with a tired smile, "but not today." The day blurred into familiar rhythm. Customers came for her famous sweet potato hand pies and ginger molasses cookies. Old Mr. Chen bought his daily apple fritter. The teenage girls from the high school giggled over her chocolate bourbon brownies. By 8 o'clock that evening, Judith's feet were screaming and her back ached, but the register showed enough to cover rent with a little leftover. "Get home and sleep," she muttered to herself, locking up the bakery. "Tomorrow's another day." She took her usual route through the Central District, past the closed shops and the few restaurants still serving dinner. The rain had started an hour ago, that persistent Seattle drizzle that soaked through everything. She was almost past the alley when she heard it, a sound that made her stop despite her exhaustion. A child. Crying. Now, 20 minutes later, Judith unlocked the bakery and ushered the shivering boy inside. She flipped on the lights, and the warm glow made him blink. "Okay, let's get you warmed up. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Minjay," the boy whispered. "Kang Minjay." "I'm Judith. Nice to meet you, Minjay." She kept her voice gentle, the way her mother used to talk to scared children at church. "How old are you?" He held up 7 fingers, his hand still shaking. "I ran away. I thought Daddy was going to get rid of me." Judith's heart broke. "Oh, baby. Why would you think that?" "I heard him talking to his friends. They said someone had to be gotten rid of, that they were a problem." Fresh tears spilled down his face. "And Daddy's been so angry since Mommy died, and I thought maybe he doesn't want me anymore." "I'm sure that's not true," Judith said firmly, though alarm bells were ringing in her mind. She pushed the concerns aside and focused on the immediate need. "When did you last eat?" "This morning," Minjay admitted quietly. "Before I left." Judith moved quickly, pulling out a sweet potato hand pie and warming it in the small oven. She poured a glass of milk and set both in front of him. "Here you go, baby. Eat slowly, okay?" Minjay devoured the food like he was starving, and Judith's heart ached watching him. When he finally slowed down, some color had returned to his cheeks. "Better?" He nodded, wiping his mouth carefully. "Thank you, Miss Judith. You're very kind." The formal politeness made her smile despite the situation. "You're very well-mannered, Minjay. Your parents raised you right." She paused. "Speaking of which, do you know their phone number? We need to call them." Minjay's face crumpled. "I only know my house number, but I don't know where the house is. Everything looks different in the dark and the rain." "What about your address or your school?" "I don't go to school yet," Minjay said quietly. "I have tutors at home, and I don't know the address. I just know we live in a big house on an island with a bridge." Mercer Island, Judith realized. That was serious money. Private tutors. Island estate. "What do your parents do for work?" Minjay's expression shuddered, a guardedness that seemed far too adult for a 7-year-old. "My daddy has businesses, import and export. Lots of buildings." His voice dropped to a whisper. "People are scared of him sometimes. But he's not scary to me. He's just sad. My mommy died when I was born, and he's been sad ever since." Judith's instincts were screaming warnings, but looking at this scared, lonely child, she couldn't bring herself to be afraid of him. "I'm so sorry about your mommy, sweetheart." "Mrs. Han takes care of me, but she's not mommy," Minjay continued, words tumbling out. "And Daddy works all the time. He barely looks at me anymore. That's why when I heard them talking about getting rid of someone, I thought maybe it was me. Maybe I remind him too much of Mommy." "Oh, Minjay." Judith pulled him into a hug, and he clung to her like she was a lifeline. "I promise you, your daddy loves you. Parents don't stop loving their children. He's probably terrified right now, looking everywhere for you." "You think so?" "I know so," Judith said firmly. "Now it's late and you're exhausted. How about you come to my apartment for tonight? Tomorrow morning when it's light, we'll figure out how to get you home. Does that sound okay?" Minjay looked up at her with complete trust. "Okay. Thank you for taking care of me." "Of course, baby. Come on." What Judith didn't know was that across the city, in a glass-walled office overlooking Elliott Bay, Kang Tamman was in the middle of the worst night of his life. His son was missing. "Every available man is searching," Park Jun-ho reported, his usually calm face tight with stress. "We've checked every location within a 10-mile radius. No police reports matching Minjay's description. Traffic cameras show nothing." "Not good enough," Tamman said, his voice dangerously quiet. He stood at the window, hands clenched behind his back to hide their shaking. My 7-year-old son has been missing for 9 hours. 9 hours, Junho. We'll find him, Junho said firmly. Every member of the organization is looking. The boy can't have gone far. But Tamman's mind was spiraling into dark places. Minjay was small, vulnerable, alone in a city full of dangers. And it was his fault. He'd been too busy with the territorial disputes with Choi Sang-woo, too focused on the shipping contracts, too distracted by business. He'd barely spent time with his son in weeks. The last conversation they'd had was Tamman snapping, "Not now, Minjay, I'm working," when the boy had asked him to look at a drawing. He'd seen his son's face crumple, but he'd turned back to his papers, dismissing him. And now Minjay was gone. "Sir," Junho said quietly, "Dr. Yoon is here. He brought something to help you sleep." "I'm not sleeping until my son is home," Tamman said flatly. He'd made many enemies building his empire, controlled the import-export business on the entire West Coast through calculated risks and ruthless decisions. He'd always known his lifestyle came with prices. He just never thought Minjay would be the one to pay it. Somewhere in Seattle, his son was alone and scared. Or worse, captured by rivals who would use him as leverage, who would hurt an innocent child to destroy Tamman. The thought made him physically ill. "Find him," he ordered Junho. "I don't care what it takes. Burn this city down if you have to. Find my son." At that exact moment, Minjay was safe and warm in Judith's small apartment, wrapped in her softest blanket on her worn couch. She'd given him one of her t-shirts to sleep in after a warm shower, and he'd fallen asleep almost immediately, exhausted from fear and crying. Judith sat in her kitchen, phone in hand, debating her next move. She should call the police. That was the logical thing to do. But Minjay's fear when she'd suggested it earlier had been real and visceral. "Please, no police. Daddy says we don't talk to police." That single statement told Judith everything she needed to know about what kind of man Minjay's father was. She looked at the sleeping child and made a decision. One night wouldn't hurt. Tomorrow, in daylight, they'd find his home. She'd make sure he got back safely, and then she'd walk away from whatever world he came from. Simple, clean, safe. If you're wondering what happens next, drop a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is about to get intense. Morning came too quickly. Judith woke to find Minjay standing beside her bed, clutching something to his chest. A sketchbook, she realized, worn and clearly well-loved. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep okay?" "I had a bad dream," Minjay admitted. "But then I remembered you were here, and I felt better." He held out the sketchbook. "This was my mommy's. Daddy gave it to me. She used to draw in it when she was pregnant with me." Judith's throat tightened as she looked through the pages. Beautiful sketches of Seattle, of a nursery being prepared, of tiny baby clothes. The last page showed a woman's hand holding a baby's foot, dated the day Minjay was born, the day his mother died. "These are beautiful," Judith said softly. "Your mommy was very talented." "I draw too," Minjay said shyly. "Want to see?" He flipped to the back pages where his own drawings started. They were remarkably good for Sao, 7-year-old, showing real talent. Sketches of a large house, of a man who must be his father, of people in suits. And then, more recently, darker images. A boy alone in a big room, empty chairs at a dinner table, a father figure turned away, always turned away. "Oh, Minjay," Judith breathed. The loneliness in these drawings broke her heart. "Can you teach me to draw people smiling?" he asked quietly. "I forgot how." Judith pulled him into a hug. "How about we get you home first, and then maybe I can visit and we can draw together? Would you like that?" His face lit up like the sun. "Really? You'd come visit me?" "If your daddy says it's okay, absolutely." They had breakfast. Judith's homemade blueberry muffins and scrambled eggs before heading out in her old Honda. Minjay pressed his face to the window as they drove, looking for familiar landmarks. There! He suddenly shouted as they drove along the I-90 bridge toward Mercer Island. That building! I can see it from Daddy's office. It has the pointy top. The Space Needle. Judith's stomach dropped. She followed his directions, turning onto increasingly exclusive streets, past gates and security cameras. Finally, they reached a private road that led to massive iron gates with stone pillars. This is it, Minjay said excitedly. This is home. The estate beyond was enormous, a modern mansion of glass and stone that screamed wealth and power. Judith's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she pulled up to the gate. A security guard emerged from the guardhouse, his hand moving immediately to his waist. A gun, she realized with a jolt of fear. Then he saw Minjay and his eyes went wide. He spoke rapidly into a radio in Korean, and the gates began swinging open. "Ma'am, pull through," the guard said, his English accented but clear. His eyes scanned Judith with undisguised suspicion. "Park in the circular drive. Don't leave the vehicle until instructed." Judith's heart pounded as she drove through. The driveway curved through perfectly landscaped grounds before opening to a circular drive in front of the mansion. And standing on the steps, surrounded by at least a dozen men in dark suits, was the most intimidating man Judith had ever seen. He was tall and powerfully built, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to burn with intensity even from a distance. His black hair was styled perfectly, and he wore a black suit with a black shirt, the top buttons undone in a way that should have looked casual, but instead seemed deliberately commanding. Even from here, Judith could see the edge of a tattoo on his neck. Elegant Korean characters that curved toward his collar. This was Kang Tamman, and every instinct in Judith's body screamed that she was in serious danger. Tamman moved toward the car with controlled speed, and Judith saw his hand shaking as he yanked open the back door. Minjay tumbled out, throwing himself at his father. Daddy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. I thought you thought—" "Shh." Tamman cut him off. And Judith was shocked to see his hands trembling as he ran them over his son, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did anyone hurt you? Tell me right now." "No, Daddy. Judith took care of me. She gave me food and let me sleep at her place, and she was really nice. She didn't hurt me at all." Tamman's eyes snapped to Judith, who was still frozen in the driver's seat. The intensity of his gaze pinned her in place, dark and calculating and absolutely terrifying. "Out!" he ordered. "Now!" Judith's hands fumbled with the door handle. She stepped out on shaking legs and was immediately surrounded by armed men. She heard the distinctive sound of guns being drawn, and her breath caught in her throat. "Wait!" Minjay shouted, pushing away from his father. "Don't hurt her. She helped me. I was lost and scared, and she took care of me. Please don't hurt her." Tamman raised a hand, and the men lowered their weapons slightly, though they didn't holster them. He studied Judith with those burning eyes, and she felt like he was seeing straight through to her soul. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "And why do you have my son?" Judith found her voice, though it came out shakier than she'd like. "My name is Judith White. I'm a baker. I found Minjay in the alley behind my bakery last night. He was crying and alone and terrified. He was lost and hungry, so I fed him and gave him a safe place to sleep. This morning, we drove around until he recognized your gates." Tamman's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You expect me to believe you just happened to find my son? That this wasn't planned? Some scheme?" "Scheme?" Judith's fear was rapidly being replaced by indignation. "What kind of scheme involves feeding a scared child and making sure he's safe? I was trying to get him home." "Daddy, please," Minjay pleaded, grabbing his father's hand. "Judith didn't know who I was. I didn't tell her your name or anything about you. She was just nice because I needed help. Don't be mad at her." Something shifted in Tamman's expression as he looked between his son and this woman who'd appeared out of nowhere. Minjay was defending her. His son, who'd been taught from birth to be cautious of strangers, who'd been surrounded by bodyguards and warned constantly about dangers, was defending this woman. "Junho," he said quietly, and one of the men stepped forward. "Background check. Everything. Now." "Yes, sir." "Wait," Judith protested. "You can't just—" "I can do whatever I want." Tamman cut her off, his voice like ice. "My son was missing for 13 hours. He reappears with a stranger I've never met. You'll forgive me if I'm not immediately trusting." He had a point, Judith realized. From his perspective, this looked incredibly suspicious. She took a breath, trying to calm her racing heart. "Fine. Run your background check. You'll find I'm exactly who I say I am. A baker who works 6 days a week to keep her father's bakery alive and pay for her mother's memory care. Now, if you're done with me, I need to get to work." "You're not going anywhere," Tamman said flatly. "Not until I'm satisfied about who you are and what you want." "I don't want anything." Judith's temper flared despite her fear. "I just wanted to make sure a lost child got home safe, which I did. So unless you're planning to shoot me, which honestly seems possible given the artillery you've got here, I'd like to leave." Several of the guards shifted uncomfortably. Apparently, people didn't usually talk to Kang Tamman that way. Tamman's eyes flashed with something that might have been surprise or annoyance. "Mrs. Han," he called, and an older Korean woman hurried out of the house. "Take Minjay inside. Feed him. Have Dr. Yoon examine him. Then put him to bed." "No," Minjay protested, his eyes filling with tears. "I want to stay with Judith." "Minjay." Tamman's voice was firm but not unkind. "Go with Mrs. Han now." The boy looked between his father and Judith, his small face crumpling. "You'll stay?" he asked Judith. "Please? Just a little bit?" Judith's heart melted despite her fear and anger. "I'll stay until your dad says I can go. I promise I won't leave without saying goodbye." "Okay," Minjay said, somewhat satisfied. He allowed Mrs. Han to lead him inside, though he kept looking back at Judith until the door closed behind him. The silence that followed was heavy and dangerous. Tamman gestured toward the house. "Inside. We need to talk." "I'd rather not." "That wasn't a request, Miss White." Judith's jaw clenched, but she followed him into the mansion, acutely aware of the armed guards flanking her. The interior was as opulent as she'd expected. Marble floors, modern art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sound. This wasn't just wealth. This was power. Tamman led her to an office that was somehow both luxurious and coldly intimidating. He gestured to a chair across from his massive desk. "Sit." "I'd rather stand." "Sit," he repeated, and something in his tone made her obey, despite her defiance. He settled into his own chair, steepling his fingers as he studied her. This close, Judith could see the exhaustion in his face, the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. This was a man who'd spent the night in hell, she realized, a father who'd thought he'd lost his child. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the moment you saw Minjay, every detail." So she did. She recounted finding the boy behind the dumpster, feeding him at the bakery, taking him to her apartment when he refused to go to the police. Their morning drive to find his home. Tamman listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. "He told you about his mother?" Tamman asked when she finished. "That she died when he was born," Judith said carefully. "And that you've been sad ever since." Tamman's expression went very still. "What else did my son tell you about me?" "That you're busy. That you own import-export businesses. That people are scared of you." Judith met his eyes. "He also said you're not scary to him. That you're just sad and distant." He ran away because he overheard you talking about getting rid of someone, and he thought you meant him. Pain flashed across Tamman's face, quickly masked. My son misunderstood a business conversation. Your son is lonely and grieving, Judith shot back. He's 7 years old and he's lost his mother and he feels like he's losing his father too. Did you know he can't remember how to draw people smiling anymore? You know nothing about my relationship with my son, Tamman said, but there was no conviction in his voice. I know he cried himself to sleep worrying that you didn't want him anymore, Judith said quietly. I know he's carrying grief that would break most adults. And I know that whatever business you're in, it's costing you the one person who loves you unconditionally. Careful, Miss White, Tamman warned, his voice dangerously soft. You're in my home, surrounded by my people. Insulting me is unwise. Then have them shoot me, Judith said, surprising herself with her boldness. But it won't change the truth. That little boy loves you desperately and needs you, and you're so caught up in your empire that you're losing him. For a long moment, Tamman just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A short, bitter sound. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Probably foolish, Judith admitted. But I spent 13 hours with your son. I saw how hurt he is. How much he misses you. And I can't just walk away without saying something, even knowing what you are. And what am I, Miss White? Dangerous, Judith said honestly. Powerful. Probably involved in things I don't want to know about. But also a father who loves his son, even if you've forgotten how to show it. Before Tamman could respond, there was a knock at the door. Junho entered, tablet in hand. Background check is complete, sir. And? She's exactly who she says she is, Junho reported. Judith Marie White, 29, orphaned 3 years ago when her father died of a heart attack. Mother has early-onset dementia, currently in Seaview Memory Care Facility. Owns and operates White's Sweet Legacy Bakery in the Central District. No criminal record, no debts beyond normal living expenses and medical bills. No connections to any rival organizations. He paused. Known in her neighborhood for giving away leftover baked goods to homeless people and helping elderly neighbors. Multiple references describe her as too kind for her own good. Judith felt vindicated despite her fear. Satisfied? Tamman leaned back in his chair, reassessing her completely. Why didn't you take him to the police? Tamman asked quietly. He begged me not to. He was terrified of the idea. I figured a 7-year-old doesn't fear police without reason. Smart, Tamman murmured. The police in this city are either on my payroll or my enemies. Either way, they would have used him as leverage. Judith's blood ran cold. What exactly do you do, Mr. Kang? Nothing you need to know about, Tamman said firmly. He stood, walking around the desk to lean against it, studying her from this new angle. You took care of my son, fed him, sheltered him, made him feel safe when he was terrified. Why? Because he needed help, Judith said simply. What other reason do I need? Something shifted in Tamman's expression. Sir, Junho said quietly, Choi Sang-woo's people have been asking questions. They know Minjay was missing. If they find out about Miss White... They won't, Tamman cut him off sharply. He looked at Judith. What you saw and heard here stays confidential. Am I clear? Crystal, Judith said. Can I go now? Daddy? A small voice came from the doorway. Minjay stood there in fresh pajamas, Dr. Yoon behind him. Is Judith leaving? Tamman's expression softened in a way that transformed his face. Minjay, you should be resting. I wanted to say thank you properly, the boy said, running to Judith and wrapping his arms around her waist. Thank you for taking care of me. You made me feel safe. Judith hugged him back, emotion tightening her throat. You take care of yourself, okay, sweetheart? And maybe talk to your daddy. Tell him how you feel. I bet he'll listen. I will, Minjay promised. He looked up at his father with hopeful eyes. Daddy, can Judith come visit? Please? She's nice and she makes me happy. Tamman's jaw clenched, clearly torn. Minjay, please, the boy insisted. Just sometimes. She could teach me to bake like she said. Please, Daddy. Judith saw the conflict in Tamman's face. He didn't want outsiders in his world, in his son's life, but he also couldn't deny his child anything, especially not after the terror of the past night. We'll see, he finally said, which made Minjay beam. I'll take that as my cue to leave, Judith said gently, extracting herself from Minjay's hug. You be good, sweetheart. She was almost to the door when Tamman's voice stopped her. Miss White. She turned. He was holding out a business card with only a phone number printed on it. If you need anything, a job, money, protection, anything, call that number. I don't need anything, Judith said firmly. Nevertheless, Tamman said, you protected my son when he was vulnerable. I don't forget debts. It wasn't a debt, Judith said. It was just being human. She left before he could respond, Junho escorting her to her car. As she drove through the gates, she caught one last glimpse of Tamman standing in the doorway, Minjay in his arms, both watching her go. She should have been relieved to escape, should have been planning to forget this entire surreal experience. Instead, she couldn't stop thinking about a lonely little boy and his father who'd forgotten how to show love. And she definitely shouldn't have been thinking about the way Kang Tamman's intense gaze had made her heart race, or the brief glimpse of vulnerability she'd seen beneath his cold exterior. This was trouble. She knew it was trouble. But as she looked at the business card on her passenger seat, something told her this wasn't over. Judith tried to return to normal life. She really did. She threw herself into the bakery, experimented with new recipes, visited her mother at the care facility. She tried not to think about Minjay or his intimidating father. It lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, a black luxury car pulled up outside the bakery during the lunch rush. Park Junho emerged, looking distinctly out of place among the working-class neighborhood crowd. Every head in the bakery turned as he approached the counter. Zoe, who was visiting during her break, looked shocked. Old Mr. Chen's eyes went wide. Miss White, Junho said formally, Mr. Kang requests your presence. Judith's heart jumped into her throat. I'm working. It's regarding his son, Junho said quietly. Minjay has been difficult. Refusing to eat properly, having nightmares. He keeps asking for you. Guilt and worry warred in Judith's chest. She'd known leaving would be hard on the boy, but she'd thought it was safer for everyone. Getting involved with Kang Tamman's world could only end badly. But the image of Minjay scared and not eating broke her heart. My shift ends at 3. Now, Miss White, Junho interrupted, though his tone was respectful. Please. Judith looked around the bakery. It was manageable without her for a few hours. She untied her apron and grabbed her jacket. I'll be back soon. Judith. Zoe grabbed her arm. What the hell is going on? Who are these people? I'll explain later, Judith promised. I'm safe. I promise. The drive to Mercer Island was silent, Junho offering no information despite Judith's questions. When they arrived, she was led not to Tamman's office, but to a bright, cheerful room filled with toys and books, Minjay's playroom. The boy was sitting on the floor, listlessly pushing a toy car back and forth. When he saw Judith, his entire face lit up. Judith! He ran to her, and she caught him in a hug. You came back. Of course I did, sweetheart, she said, kneeling to his level. I heard you weren't feeling well. I missed you, Minjay said simply. Mrs. Han is nice, but she's not you. Will you stay for a little while? Judith looked up to find Tamman standing in the doorway, watching them with an unreadable expression. He was dressed more casually today, black pants and a black button-up with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing corded forearms and the edge of more tattoos. Those same top buttons were undone, showing the column of his throat and the beginning of that phoenix tattoo she could now see curving across his collarbone. She forced herself to look away. "I can stay for a bit." What followed was one of the strangest afternoons of Judith's life. She played with Minjay, reading him stories and helping him with drawings in his sketchbook, while Tamman worked at a laptop in the corner. The domesticity of it was surreal. "Judith," Minjay said suddenly, "can you teach me to bake? You said you would." "Oh, sweetheart, I don't think—" "The kitchen is fully equipped," Tamman said, making them both turn. "Mrs. Han won't mind if you're willing." There was something in his eyes. A plea, almost. He was trying, Judith realized. Trying to give his son something that made him happy, even if it meant allowing a stranger deeper into their lives. "Okay," she found herself agreeing. "Let's make cookies." Mrs. Han was indeed accommodating, though she watched Judith with undisguised curiosity. Minjay was delighted, carefully measuring flour while Judith guided his hands, laughing when he got some on his nose. Tamman appeared in the kitchen doorway, and Judith was struck by the longing in his expression as he watched his son laugh. "You should join us," Judith said impulsively. "I don't bake," Tamman said stiffly. "Then learn," Judith challenged. "Your son would love it." "Daddy, please," Minjay begged. "Please help us." Tamman hesitated, clearly torn between his instinct to maintain distance and his desire to make his son happy. Finally, he stepped into the kitchen, and Minjay's delighted squeal made Judith smile. Watching Kong Tamman, crime lord and feared leader, carefully measuring chocolate chips under his son's excited direction was something Judith would never forget. He was terrible at it, too precise and controlled, and when flour exploded from the mixer because he'd set it too high, both Judith and Minjay dissolved into laughter. For just a moment, Tamman looked annoyed. Then, incredibly, he smiled. A real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face, softening the sharp edges and making him look almost boyish. Judith's breath caught. He was devastatingly handsome when he smiled. Their eyes met across the kitchen, and something passed between them. Recognition, attraction, danger. Tamman's smile faded, replaced by that intense look that made Judith's pulse race. "Daddy, you're doing it wrong," Minjay giggled, breaking the moment. "Like this." The cookies were lopsided and slightly burnt, but Minjay declared them the best cookies ever made. As they ate them in the kitchen, Judith felt an ache in her chest. This simple moment of warmth and laughter, this was what Minjay needed. What he'd been missing. "Thank you," Tamman said quietly when Minjay ran off to show Mrs. Han his favorite cookie. "For coming. For this." "He's a good kid," Judith said. "He deserves to be happy." "He does," Tamman agreed. His hand moved as if to touch her, then stopped, falling back to his side. "You're good with him. Natural." "I always wanted kids," Judith admitted. "Someday, when I can afford to give them a good life." "What kind of life do you want?" The question was oddly intimate, Tamman's dark eyes searching hers. "Simple," Judith said. "Safe. Honest. Everything this," she gestured around, "isn't." "Fair," Tamman said, and there was something like regret in his voice. "You should know Choi Sang-woo has been making moves, asking questions. If he finds out about you—" "I'm nobody," Judith interrupted. "Why would he care about me?" "Because my son cares about you," Tamman said bluntly. "Which means you're leverage, a vulnerability. In my world, Miss White, that makes you a target." Fear trickled down Judith's spine. "Are you saying I'm in danger because I was kind to a child?" "I'm saying kindness in my world has consequences," Tamman said. "I can offer you protection. Guards, a secure apartment, money to close the bakery." "No," Judith said firmly. I don't want your money or your protection. I just want to live my life. Then you should walk away now, Tamman said. But there was no conviction in his voice. Stop coming here. Stop seeing Minjay. It would be safer for everyone. Is that what you want? Judith challenged. To tell your son that the one person who's made him smile in months can't see him anymore because of your enemies? Tamman's jaw clenched. What I want is irrelevant. What's safe is what matters. Daddy! Judith! Minjay called from the other room. Come see what I drew. They stared at each other, the weight of impossible choices hanging between them. One more visit, Tamman finally said. Then you need to stay away. For your own safety. But they both knew it was already too late for that. Over the next 3 weeks, Judith found herself drawn deeper into their world, despite every logical reason to run. Minjay called her daily, his sweet voice asking about her day, telling her about his drawings. Junho appeared at the bakery with urgent requests that always involved checking on the boy. Mysterious deposits appeared in her bank account that she couldn't return because they were untraceable. And then there were the flowers, fresh bouquets appearing on her doorstep with no note. But she knew exactly who sent them. She tried to stay away. She really did. But then Minjay would call, his voice small and sad, asking when she'd visit again. Or she'd find herself thinking about Tamman's rare smiles, the way his eyes softened when he looked at his son, the glimpses of the man beneath the monster. It ended on a Tuesday night. Judith was closing the bakery when Junho appeared, his face tight with urgency. Miss White, you need to come with me. Now. Is Minjay hurt? He's safe. But there's been an incident. Mr. Kang requests your immediate presence. 20 minutes later, Judith was in Tamman's office. He stood with his back to her, staring out at the dark water of the Sound. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid way he held himself. What happened? She asked. He turned and she gasped. His knuckles were split and bleeding. There was blood on his shirt, and his eyes held a coldness that terrified her. Choi Sang-woo sent a message, he said flatly. He knows about you. Knows that Minjay cares about you. He's threatened to use that against me. Judith's blood ran cold. What kind of message? The kind delivered with bodies, Tamman said, his voice devoid of emotion. 2 of my men. He left a note saying next time it would be someone I actually cared about. Then I'll leave, Judith said immediately. I'll disappear. Go somewhere far away where he can't find me. Too late, Tamman said. He's already had you followed. He knows where you live, where you work, where your mother is. Running would only confirm your importance to me. Then what do we do? We? Tamman's eyes sharpened. There is no we, Miss White. This is my world, my war. You're an innocent who got caught in the crossfire. An innocent your son loves, Judith shot back. An innocent who's apparently now a target because I fed a hungry child. So yes, we. What do we do? For a long moment, Tamman just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he crossed the room and cupped her face in his hands. Those same hands that were bruised from violence now touching her with infinite gentleness. You should be running, he said quietly. You should be terrified of me, of this situation. I am terrified, Judith whispered. But I'm not running. Not if it means Minjay gets hurt. Not if it means you face this alone. Why? The question was raw, vulnerable. Why do you care? Because Minjay needs you, Judith said. And maybe you need someone too. Someone who sees the man, not the monster. I am a monster, Tamman said harshly. I've killed people, Judith. Destroyed lives. You've only seen the edges of my world. Then show me, Judith challenged. Show me the worst. Let me decide what I can handle. Something broke in Tamman's expression. He kissed her, fierce and desperate, a drowning man reaching for air. Judith gasped against his mouth but didn't pull away, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tamman rested his forehead against hers. "This is insane." "Completely," Judith agreed. "I have a plan to end this," Tamman said. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Judith thought about Minjay's drawings, his lonely eyes, his desperate need for love. She thought about this man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten how to let anyone in. She thought about the simple act of kindness that had led her here, to this impossible moment. "Yes," she said, "I trust you." If you've made it this far, hit that like button and subscribe, because you won't believe how this ends. The final confrontation with Choi Sang-woo put everything on the line, and what happens next will leave you speechless. 3 days later, Judith stood beside Tamman at an exclusive restaurant, bait for the trap they'd set. She wore an elegant dress he'd insisted on, playing the role of the woman who mattered to him. Around them, his people watched, and somewhere in the shadows, so did Choi Sang-woo's. The attack came as they left. 3 cars blocked the street, armed men emerging. But Tamman had anticipated this. His own people moved into position, a carefully choreographed dance of power and violence. Choi Sang-woo himself stepped forward, older than Tamman, with cruel eyes and a cold smile. "So this is your weakness. She's lovely. Tell me, does she know what you really are?" "She knows enough," Tamman said coldly, pushing Judith behind him. "And unlike you, she sees beyond the blood." "How touching," Sang-woo sneered. "But it doesn't matter. You've gone soft, Tamman. This woman, your son, they're vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities get exploited." "Then exploit them," Tamman challenged. "Right here, right now." What happened next was fast and brutal. Sang-woo reached for his gun. Tamman moved like lightning. Shots rang out. Junho shoved Judith to the ground, his body covering hers protectively. When the shooting stopped, Sang-woo was down, bleeding, and Tamman stood over him. "You made a mistake tonight," Tamman said, his voice like death. "You threatened my family. There's no coming back from that." Within hours, Sang-woo was handed over to the organization's elders, his violations of their codes ensuring his permanent removal from power. The threat was ended, but Judith knew the cost. She'd seen Tamman's world in all its violence, and she'd chosen to stay anyway. 6 months later, Judith woke in Tamman's bed, wrapped in his arms. Minjay crashed through the door, climbing between them with delighted giggles. "Judith! Daddy! Mrs. Han says we can make pancakes." Her life had changed completely. The bakery now had proper funding. Her mother's care facility bills were paid, and she'd found a family in the most unexpected place. Tamman was slowly learning to show love again, and Minjay's drawings now showed smiling faces, families together. Hope. "I love you," Tamman whispered, kissing her forehead as Minjay chattered about his day. "I love you too," Judith said. "Both of you. My boys." She'd given food to a crying child and found her entire world transformed. Sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Sometimes love finds you in the darkest places. And sometimes saving someone else is exactly how you save yourself. Thanks for watching till the end. Drop a comment telling us what you thought of Judith and Tamman's story, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.